Good morning and welcome to the February 12, 2019 Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting. Madam Clerk.
Item 1 on the closed session agenda is conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, closed session with County Designated Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins regarding Employee Organization Service Employees International Union.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we will move to closed session. Good morning and welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for the 12th of February 2019. I'd like to welcome you all today. If you are capable, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Supervisor Mill, will you please lead us this morning?
Let us begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to announcements. Clerk.
Report of today's closed sessions. Item 1, conference with labor negotiator. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, closed session with County Designated Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins regarding Employee Organization Service Employees International Union. There was no reportable action taken.
Thank you very much. Are there any announcements from the board? Supervisor Miller.
Yes, Chair. There is a meeting tonight with the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin Authority in Lockford beginning at 5:30 at their community hall. This is an opportunity for public input regarding the basin plan and for anyone that is living basically in District 1. You are going to be affected by these decisions, and the state is now giving us their statement on what they're going to do should there be a probationary period or a default and a failure to perform, which is quite onerous. And I think that people need to understand what those pieces mean as to how they're going to step in and run the show should we not be able to do it. So there is on the GSA website the PowerPoint presentations for this. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and contact myself or Peter Martin with the CCWD so we can get your questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor.
You can include parts of District 5, western parts of District 5 in that also.
Mm-hmm. So if you're in the western side of the county, you're involved. Very good. Any announcements from staff? Seeing none, we will move on to recognitions and acknowledgments.
Item 2 is from the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors to proclaim the week of February 11th through February 15th, 2019 as Kindness Week in Calaveras County and further deem the county as a random acts of kindness zone.
Supervisor Calloway, will you please take the reins on this?
Yes. Is there anyone here representing the Bergantz family? Well, then I'm going to represent the Bergantz family, which is truly my honor. Jim Bergantz and his family started Random Acts of Kindness like 20-some years ago, and they used to give out flowers. But then they owned a flower shop, so that made sense. So I really feel that Jim and Judy and their family have brought the importance and a good reminder to the rest of us every year that it doesn't take much to buy somebody a cup of coffee, starting with your favorite supervisor.
I have to report that as a gift, though, Supervisor Calloway.
Oh, no, it's under $10. So I want to read this in honor of the Bergantz. Whereas National Random Acts of Kindness Week will be observed February 11 through 15, And whereas Calaveras County's participated in random acts of kindness since 2010, we're a little slow in catching up to City of Angels. Whereas all who live and or work within Calaveras are encouraged to practice random acts of kindness, and the tradition started in Angels Camp by the Bergantz family. Now there it be proclaimed that Calaveras County Board of Supervisors recognizes
We
what?
need to do a vote.
We do? Okay, let me finish reading and then we'll take a vote. The week of February 11th. So, could you please do a random act of kindness to me?
I am doing a
And
random act of kindness. You could finish and then we'll circle back.
February, okay, thank you. February 11th through 15 to be Kindness Week throughout the county. I'm surprised Elsa Gala didn't catch it first. Be it further proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors declares that the County of Calaveras be deemed a random act of kindness zone, and as the clerk to the board told us this morning, somebody stole our kindness zone sign today. During the week of February 11th, and that the residents and visitors continue to observe the ripples of kindness throughout 2019. Go ahead.
Okay, so we will have some board discussion, then we're going to circle back and vote on this proclamation. Any comments from the board?
Would it be better to do public comment first?
We can do public comment. Public comment?
Marty Crane. Maria, thank you for sharing that history. I recall that when the Bergantz family did it, you could go and they would give you a dozen roses, but you could only keep one, and you couldn't just give 11 to one person. You had to give one to a different person throughout the community, and that's definitely spreading the feeling of kindness. And today, as we talk about things in the county, we develop policies, and our general plan update is coming. I would like us to sprinkle a bit of kindness throughout the policy, because after all, the policies, the general plan update is the guiding principle for how we live here and how we develop fair and balanced policy that provides for equal and balanced opportunities for everyone. So sprinkle a little kindness out there. Thank you.
Ms. Newman?
Good morning. Also, what the Bergantz family initiated was these little blue ribbons that said acts of kindness, and that's exactly what I mean. And I just want to brag a little bit, because over the years I received one from Steve Walensky, who's not here anymore, one from Daryl Rusk, who is not here at all anymore, and one from Joe Kelly, who's gone on to Green Acres. So I just want to, someone thought I was kind at some point, so remember that.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. Excuse me, one more.
Al Taxpayer Association. We appreciate this. This is really a wonderful thing, and it's really positive. One of the things that we might consider is kindness to taxpayers. What a thought. That means that we try to be responsible in our spending, and we try to respect the rights of life, liberty, and property of all our citizens. This is truly kindness to taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that any other public comment? And we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Is there discussion or a motion?
I'll move this item.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Toffenaro, second by Supervisor Mills. Any further comment?
By the way, Mr. Kelly is still around. I get emails from him, so.
Therefore, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 5-0. And the proclamation, which has been read, is approved. Happy Kindness Day. Is there anybody to present that to? All right, then we will,
I'll send it to
it'll be,
I'll send it to
thank you very much, Supervisor Callaway will send it on. Moving on to public comment. We have 30 minutes. I again encourage everybody to be civil, respectful, and exercise your First Amendment rights. but try to do it in the nicest way as you can. So we'll open it up. Madam Clerk?
Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Thank you very much. And if I could remind everybody, if we could keep, we can't have more than 5, but if the queue's got 5 in it, we'll keep going to 30 minutes. And if we exceed 30 minutes, we will continue at the end of the board meeting. Tom, you're on.
Good morning. Tom Griffin for the Planning Coalition. Today I'm going to point out 2 problems with the general plan introduction. One is that the purpose is too narrow. Government Code Section 65400 indicates the general plan should serve as an effective guide for orderly growth and development, preservation, conservation of open space lands and natural resources, and the efficient expenditure of public funds relating to the subjects addressed in the general plan. However, the purpose of the 2016 draft is only focused on growth and development of economic conditions. The plan promotes economic prosperity, protects property rights, enhances productive resources, and enhances innovative economic pursuits. And that only encompasses the element that cover land use, circulation, housing, public facilities, and services and resource production. Sorry, I'm kind of sick. There's more to the general plan than just growth and development. The general plan also includes required elements covering conservation, open space, noise, and safety. Government Code 65302. General plan is also an opportunity to coordinate local budget planning with state and federal government programs. That's code 65300.9. And the solution is to use the words from the government code to finish the purpose statement in the general plan as follows. The Calaveras County General Plan is intended to serve as an effective guide for orderly growth and development, preservation and conservation of open space lands and natural resources, and the efficient expenditure of public funds relating to the subjects addressed in the general plan. And number 2, the other problem is the reasons for adjusting the plan are too narrow. Government Code 65358 allows the county to amend the general plan, providing that the amendment is in the public interest. The introduction says the adjustments may be made to accommodate changes in economic conditions, population growth, or demographics. These are certainly circumstances when the plan could be amended to allow for additional needed development, but this is just a very narrow spectrum of what's quote-unquote in the public interest. For example, a general plan amendment might be needed to accommodate a Williamson Act contract for ag land conservation like it was just recently. The solution is to change the sentence in the introduction to read as follows. Adjustments to the plan may be necessary to serve the public interest. And thank you, and please consider adopting these changes when it comes up on your agenda. Good morning.
Tom?
Tom Infacino, Calaveras Planning Coalition. One problem with the draft general plan introduction is that the plan is allowing the continuation and expansion of legal non-conforming uses. The introduction says that uses that were lawfully established but that will no longer be consistent with the general plan update and revised county code, quote, shall be allowed to continue such uses under the non-conforming use provision of Title 17 of the county code. Title 17 of the county code allows such uses to continue so long as they are not interrupted. These can even be reestablished after interruption with a use permit. The introduction also says that expansion of legally existing non-conforming uses shall meet the development requirements of this general plan, unquote. When a previously allowed use does not conform to a new zone The goal of planning law is to eliminate the nonconformance. The county has failed to do this in the past. Sometimes, when the use is not posing any problems, this involves simply rezoning the site into a zone which allows the use either by right or by permit. On the other extreme, if the nonconforming use creates a public nuisance, then the use can be stopped by the county immediately. Now, what happens in between those two extremes? When a nonconforming use does not pose like an acute nuisance, but does threaten long-term health and safety, welfare, peace, or morals of the community, or creates a significant environmental impact, the use is given a set period of time in which to recover the investments prior to ceasing operations. This avoids the county having to condemn a use and compensate the owner. Also, during the amortization period, and this is very important, the operation is not allowed to expand. Expanding such a use is in direct contradiction to planning law. The county's refusal to follow this aspect of planning law caused problems in Valley Springs when the quarry wanted to add an asphalt plant. The solution is to change the first sentence to read that the use, quote, shall be discontinued after a reasonable period, allowing the owner an opportunity to receive the benefit of the owner's initial investment, unquote. The solution is change the second sentence to read, quote, legally existing non-conforming uses will not be allowed to expand in size or capacity or production or duration or in undesirable impacts or to add additional non-conforming uses. And the third part of the solution is to add two sentences. When the legally existing non-conforming use is not posing any public nuisance or land use conflict, the site may be rezoned into a zone in which the use is allowed by right or with a use permit. If the legally existing non-conforming use creates a public nuisance or is in violation of health and safety laws or regulations justifying cessation of operations, then the county will cease the operation as soon as possible. Thank you. If we went too fast, a memorandum is forthcoming.
Marty?
Good morning. I'm Marty Crane. I'm speaking with and on behalf of the Calaveras Planning Coalition. Today, I'd like to point out a problem with the general plan update land use element. The problem is that it's not clear which lower intensity and density zones will be allowed in which land use designations. A land use element designates the proposed general distribution, general location, and extent of uses of the land for housing, business, industry, open space, including agriculture, natural resources, recreation, and enjoyment of scenic beauty, education, public buildings and grounds, solid and liquid waste facilities, and other categories of public and private uses of land. The objective of a land use element is to set forth a pattern of land use that is coherent and predictable. It should be detailed enough so that all users of the plan can reach the same conclusion of the appropriate use of any parcel of land. Page LU14 includes table LU2 that is supposed to provide basic guidelines regarding which zoning districts are consistent with the land use designations in the 2016 draft general plan. It does identify some of the zoning districts that would be consistent with each land use designation. However, there is a note on the page stating, quote, lower density or intensity zoning shall be considered a compatible zone. That policy states, quote, less intensive residential and agricultural zoning districts shall be deemed compatible with the general plan's land use designation as an interim zone until such time as infrastructure and services are available to support intended development. What does that mean? Does this mean that lower intensity agricultural zoning district can be compatible with higher intensity residential land use designations? On one hand, it might keep the area in agriculture longer, and the infrastructure needed for development may never reach the parcel. On the other hand, should a ranch destined to become 500 to 900 homes and designated for future specific plan be given agricultural zoning so that current owners can keep their taxes low pending on their future development? Reasonable minds may differ on the wisdom of this policy. Or does this mean that a less dense residential zoning district can be compatible with more dense commercial designations or with more dense industrial designations? If so, this policy essentially creates a residential overlay across commercial and industrial designations that sharply increases the potential for land use conflicts. A senior citizen home does not belong next to a late-night music venue or an acute source of air pollution that could aggravate
Thank you very
heart
much, Marty. I'm sorry.
and lung disease.
Thank you.
I can't read any faster, but I did bring it.
Joyce?
Morning. Joyce Teckel speaking for the Calaveras Planning Coalition. Today I'm going to point out two problems with the general plan update land use element. The first problem is that there is no designation, zone, inventory, or diagram that differentiates the very different types of public land uses. The Government Code 65302 specifically calls out three types of public land uses separately: education, public buildings and grounds, and solid and liquid waste facilities. The general plan guidelines indicate that these three land uses should each be given their own land use designations. This makes sense for a couple of reasons. First, because the public land uses, while all beneficial, are hardly interchangeable. Second, it is critical to give the marketplace the correct information it needs to make informed decisions regarding the acquisition of land for investment. Finally, the road and other infrastructure needs will be different for each of these land uses, comparing the schools to solid waste facilities. They're very different. Because these public land uses are so different, it makes sense to use distinct land use designations or one land use designation with subheadings like public-waste, public-education, public-office. Only in this way can one determine if the land use designation as mapped is appropriate and consistent with all elements of the general plan. However, the land use element currently lumps these three distinct land uses into one designation, PI Public Institutional. This makes it impossible to determine if sufficient land is properly designated for each distinct type of public use. The solution is to provide a distinct land use designation that divides the PI designation into similar types of land uses. For instance, PI-emergency services, PI-waste, PI-office, PI-education. The second problem is that the community designation guidelines may be developed without community input. The 2016 draft general plan calls for the Board of Supervisors to develop design guidelines for communities. The 2014 draft general plan had called for the community design guidelines to be developed by a community planning process to incorporate community input. This public participation part of the process was eliminated by the Planning Commission's editing. In disadvantaged communities, that is low income and pollution exposed, the county is required by law to, quote, promote civil engagement in public decision-making processes, close quote. Design guidelines can affect the ability to walk or bicycle in a community and to be buffered from pollution sources. These are exactly the kind of, quote, public decision-making processes, close quote, the law is intending to engage the public in. Thus, for disadvantaged communities, the county's community design guideline process may be illegal as contrary to the promotion of civil engagement. I'm done. Thank you.
Hey, rules have to be equally applied for everybody. No?
Good morning. Neil McEwen on behalf of the Calaveras Planning Coalition. Today I'm going to point out two problems with the draft general plan update land use element. The first problem is that the lack of standards for hillside development suggests that the plan lacks issue comprehensiveness. A general plan is supposed to be comprehensive in that it addresses development and conservation issues to the degree that they are present in the jurisdiction. Government Code Section 65301, subsection C. For example, because tens of thousands of acres of private land in Calaveras County is comprised of steeply sloped stream and river canyons, the general plan must address standards for the safe development of some slopes and the avoidance of development on other slopes. The general plan will have significant impacts on soil erosion because the Planning Commission removed the program to develop hillside development standards. The solution is to put back into the general plan the program to draft hillside development standards. These standards should deal with the issues beyond erosion and address interference with water supply and water quality of down gradient wells, and the fire safety mitigation needed for the development on steep slopes where fire spreads faster. Such development should require a use permit that is reviewable on appeal to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. While 90% of the permit applications may be perfectly sound, your constituents depend on you to retain the power to condition or stop the 10% or so that would otherwise be insanely dangerous. The second problem is that the incomplete treatment of historic resources suggests that the plan lacks issue comprehensiveness. The 2016 Draft General Plan acknowledges that the county includes communities rich in gold rush era history that value their heritage. It even sets up a historic center land use designation. One implementation program is to establish a compatible historic commercial / mixed use zone, and the other is to facilitate implementation of state and federal incentive programs for historic preservation. There will be significant aesthetic impacts associated with the development in historic centers because the Planning Commission removed the program for creating historic design standards from the 2014 Draft General Plan. In addition, the county rejected all the recommendations of local experts to address historic preservation. These include the proper implementation of existing laws, thus one would have a strong argument that the general plan reflects a failure to comprehensively address the issue. The solution is for the general plan to include the programs routinely applied in other counties and recommended by local expert Julia Costello. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Newman?
Good morning, Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. From my amateur perspective, the main problem with the general plan is we have not had the Mintier Harnish report released. I think that would be a real eye-opener. What I really come here, and I think I need to explain myself, is I use this as therapy. I have a time to vent my frustrations. I don't have to pay a psychiatrist. I haven't gone postal on anyone yet. Al suggested once I come here and say positive things. I'm not trying to run for office or make any friends. The second reason I come here is to ask questions that I think the public wants to know, mainly about money, how you all are deciding to spend it. And to suggest that I spend as much time reading all the background information as you do is kind of arrogant, because I don't get paid $60,000 or $75,000 a year to do that, but you guys do. My questions can be answered in less than 1 minute. You all even had a Board of Supervisor many times that came totally unprepared and didn't read the information. And the last reason I come here is to hold you guys accountable. I sit and I judge and I observe. I observe and I judge. I know that people don't change. People can modify their behavior for a period of time. They can clean up their acts, so to speak. But as soon as they're stressed out or they feel cornered or they're drunk, their true behavior is going to show. And I guess this is the end of my kindness week thing. I'm not being kind now, but I feel sometimes that y'all don't hear. You don't listen, you don't hear, and you don't respond. For that reason, I'm also going to suggest that once again, you all need to have office hours that the public knows about, where we can come and sit down with you one-on-one, and there can be a verbal exchange of information so that we don't come back time after time repeating the same issues that we have problems with and that might be resolved by a simple exchange of information. And lastly, because I'm into it, I have some information about the total lunar eclipse that happened last month. It was a super blood wolf moon. And this will help you understand what all of those terms mean.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lynn.
Thank you.
Mr. Segala, Ms. Wiki.
Good morning, Board. Beth Whitkey from D5. I would like for you to consider at some point revisiting the rules that were adopted last fall. I'm feeling like we're stuck in a rut and that we're not going to move forward until maybe we change the way that we communicate with each other. I love the idea of office hours so that we can come and see all of you directly, but I noticed during national politics, like the judiciary hearings when they were confirming a Supreme Court nominee, that members of the committee are able to cede their time. And it seems to me that sometimes people have more to say than 3 minutes will allow. And so if others are able to cede their time, people from the Planning Commission or other folks can actually finish what they want to say. So I wish that we wouldn't be so militant in those rules and that we could have some discretion. And especially during study sessions, instead of it being competing monologues all the time, that we have an actual conversation. It's so frustrating to come here week after week and feel like we're just in separate echo chambers. So I'd like to revisit that. I would like for it to be a collaboration between the board and the citizens on how to solve some of our problems. I'm deeply concerned about the people in District 2 being without housing, without options. Now with the bankruptcy, people are living in tents and it's snowing outside. This is unacceptable. We have to get shelters open. We have to help the most needy people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Segala. How many more speakers do I have? Betty, Al, 2 more? All right.
When the urgency ordinance was passed, the people of Calaveras County were double-crossed. And so they went out and gathered 5,200 signatures, which the judge dumped after many months. And now we're facing another, well, let's put it this way, they were crossed when the urgency ordinance was passed. Now they're getting ready to be double-crossed. And I am sorry that I'm outvoted, but I have to stand here and say what I feel, that it's wrong to ignore what has happened here. And we have a newspaper that should be dubbed the Cannabis Courier instead of the Calaveras Enterprise, because they are totally for one side, and that is the pot side.
Thank you. Al, you'll be our last speaker.
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. Wow, there's an awful lot to comment on. Could I have more than 3 minutes?
No.
No. Okay. On the general plan, a general plan could be very helpful, and especially when it's reasonable. It can be an oppressive document and can destroy our economy if it becomes a dictatorship of the collective. And we're close to the edge of that. So I'd like to remind you that the purpose of government is to protect the rights of life, liberty, and property of all the people, not just the ones you like. Also, if you would refer to the U.S. Constitution, which is superior to our general plan, Amendments 5 and 14 specify life, liberty, and property as being the most important consideration. So if we bear this in mind as we review the general plan, we'll probably stay out of trouble, and above all else, do no harm. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much. Seeing no more people standing here, we'll close public comment. I'll reiterate again, I'm trying to apply public speaking opportunities equally for all sides on any subject, and I ask everybody to be respectful in return and stay within the 3-minute time period. So we'll move on to consent agenda.
Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Thank you very much. Board members, are there items that you'd like to pull from the consent agenda? This is a very long one. We tried to put a lot of work in here today. So, but some are going to get pulled. Dennis?
Agenda item number 6. 14, 15,
A second.
19, 20, 21, 22, 23 as a block.
19, 20.
19, 20. Okay, 15, then 19. I'm waiting for Diane to, it's okay.
Yeah, she's got to type it in.
She's got to go through the 20. I'm waiting for her. Okay, 21, 22, 23, and 27.
Sorry. 21.
22, 23, and 27.
Anybody else? Supervisor Stepper?
He pretty much got everything except for 12, which I think needs to be separated anyways because it's a 4/5 vote. It's not? Okay. Well, I still want to pull it.
Supervisor Tokenari? Supervisor Callaway? Anything? I would like to pull item 30 and 27's already pulled. So. Yes, ma'am. I'd like to pull number 30. We'll circle back. Other staff have items they want to pull? Public? Very well. Ms. Newman?
Number 11. Number 33.
Number 11 and number 33. Anybody else?
Number 12?
12. It's already pulled. Very well. So is there a motion on the remainder of the consent items?
I removed the few that are remaining.
Thank you very much. Second?
I moved.
Moved by Supervisor Mills, second by Supervisor Callaway. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. As far as how we take these on, I'd like to move 27 and 30 till after the OES presentation. So we can sort of take on, they're related, so we'll just take that on together unless there's anybody with a problem. Very well.
You need to turn on your microphone because you're kind of mumbling.
I'm going to move number 30 and number 27, which were pulled from the consent item, till after we hear the OES update in the regular agenda. Since they're related, we could do that at the same time, have one conversation. Michelle doesn't have to be in mass and stand up and down all day.
I need 1 second.
Okay? Just for the audience, we will take a break at roughly between 10:15 and 10:30, depending on the flow, and then we'll re-adjourn. So that's when your break will be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very well. Item 6.
Item 6 is from Human Resources to adopt a resolution authorizing changes to the Planner 1, 2, 3, 4, and Substance Abuse Counselor 1, 2 job descriptions.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Mills.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had a conversation with Mr. Maurer on this one yesterday, and it has to do with the Planner 1 position that's listed on packet page 40, where it states it graduated from accredited college with a bachelor's degree, and it gives specific types of degrees that would be permitted. I took an opportunity then to look at Tuolumne County. I mean, we're very quick to use comparative counties when it comes to our salaries or our wage and benefit plans. So we should, to some degree, have some similarity in our position control list and those job descriptions. So I reviewed to Tuolumne County, a Planner 1 is equivalent of completion of a 2-year degree or equivalent education at an accredited educational institution with major coursework in planning, political science, environmental studies, natural resource management, and these 2 are included in theirs, it's not in ours. Watershed management, forestry, or a closely related field. My concern is this, that if we create a position that has a higher level of requirement, we are going to be, to some degree, limiting the field, which would be our applicant pool in the future. So I want to be sure that we are not putting ourselves in a position where we're going to not be able to gain people simply because we've placed too high a bar on that particular position.
Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Management. One of the things that we put in place, I believe at budget last year, we do have a trainee level that I don't believe Tuolumne has. And so essentially we have 3 levels. And the reason that Peter worked on these revisions was making sure that because we brought back the trainee level, that the 1, 2, 3 was properly aligned. And so that is also one of the reasons for this. And I can let you, Peter, speak to the rest.
Yes, Peter Maurer, Planning Director. Thank you for the heads up on this, Dennis. Gave me a chance to do a little more research yesterday afternoon. It's true that the Tuolumne County Planner 1 position only requires a 2-year degree. We also have the option of a 2-year degree plus 2 years of experience. My purpose in upgrading all of these positions was after several years of recruitment trying to find qualified individuals, we were getting a lot of applicants that really didn't meet the qualifications that I need to get the job done. I looked also at Amador, Mariposa, and El Dorado County, and they all require a 4-year degree for their Planner 1 position. We did create the planner trainee position. Actually, it was an old position we had on the books for a long time, hadn't been used. We sort of dusted that off during the need to hire a lot of additional staff while we were processing cannabis applications. And we now have filled that position on a permanent basis with a new trainee that started last month with just the 2-year experience. So I'm confident that having a 4-year degree is not going to put us at a disadvantage. I'll be frank, what puts us at a disadvantage is our salary scale. I know that's not something we can address now, but that is something that all department heads are concerned about, is how do we recruit good, qualified people who want to work here. In comparison, our Planner 1 position starts at $22.70. Tuolumne County starts at $22.50. El Dorado County starts at $28 an hour. So, and Amador County is $24.50. So, there's a lot of different factors that go into the job descriptions, the recruitment that we have. I think that to meet the needs of our county for a professional position, a 4-year degree, and there is a lot of flexibility. We have in the job description, or related degree, and believe me, I've looked at all kinds of opportunities for related degree. We have water quality specialists, we have hydrologists, and someone with, I've once hired someone with an English degree background, but also had worked for a public agency, ended up being one of my best planners. So the ability to think, to use the cognitive process to solve problems that comes from getting a college degree, I think is important in the world that we live in and work in today in the planning sector. So I would strongly recommend that you go with the 4-year degree as recommended, and has been discussed with the union and my staff and the Human Resources Department. Do you have any questions?
I just have a concern, and that is that if you could go to Tuolumne County and 2-year degree is, a 4-year degree is only worth 50 cents an hour. In comparison, we can't be then using Tuolumne County as one of those counties when we do wage comparisons, simply because of the difference in the job description. I want that very clearly understood, that there's no reason to try to include them in those numbers. And it's knowing that it's going to be very easy for someone to get a Planner 1 job in Tuolumne County simply with lesser qualifications. I understand why you want a greater qualification in most counties around us, and you're right, they all are 4-year degrees. I just saw this as an anomaly, and I wanted to be sure that we weren't limiting our applicant pool by stepping into this area, and that there needed to be an open discussion about it. That was the whole purpose in bringing it up today.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there further board discussion or questions, Supervisor Mills? No. Is there any public comment on this item?
House of Gallup Taxpayer Association. It seems like one of the important things that government does when it gets into planning is to affect the lives of people, their future plans, what they can do with their property, whether they can have a business or not, so if this is true, these are very sensitive positions, and there probably needs to be more involved than a college education or the number of years in college. And Peter said that the main purpose of the college education is for the development of analytical skills where you can solve problems. That's really true, and it's a good point. But might be a better point would be these people that go into this service should fully understand the Constitution and should fully understand the nature of human rights, especially property rights. And so we would suggest that one of the requirements either before or after being hired, is that these individuals take a course in the Constitution. Makes sense. Thank you.
Further comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Is there any further discussion or motion?
I'll move this item, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Supervisor Toffenelli.
Second.
Seconded by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Item 10.
Item number 11 is from Human Resources to authorize the board chair to sign an agreement with Calaveras County Office of Education for the provision of the Students with a Goal program in an amount not to exceed $80,000 for a period of July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019.
Ms. Newman, you pulled this item?
Yes, I did. My question is, where does the $80,000 come from? Is that general fund, or where's that money coming from? Then I have a suggestion. If all of these agenda items would note the funding sources, it might save me from having to ask where the money's coming from, because I'm trying to follow the money and find out how home care can get a raise. So what funding source is number 11 come from?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Kristen Brinks, Health and Human Services Agency. As indicated in our staff report, the financing is coming from the funding sources that are state and federal sources. One is the commercially sexually exploited children amount of money we get to address those needs, as do other counties in our state, as well as the independent living program state allocations.
Thank you. That's in the packet.
Kristen, before you walk away, and you know I've been a stickler on this, about where does the funding come from, and give me the org numbers and all of that, and you've done a great job in putting that down, and every time you've made a submittal, so thank you for that, because I do track it.
Yep.
So to say, it says very clearly, financing, no impact to the county general fund. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Any public comment on this item? Bring it back to the board. Further discussion on motion?
I will move the item.
I will second.
Moved by Supervisor Mills, seconded by Supervisor Toffenelli. I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. 12.
Item 12 is from Public Works to approve a budget transfer and authorize the auditor controller to transfer $300,000 from contingencies to a newly created org key for the removal of dead trees on BLM land as a result of the Butte fire, requiring a 4/5 affirmative vote of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Stopper, you pulled this item?
Yes, sir. I was contacted by a few members of the public, and they just asked me to bring this up because it does say it's from contingencies, and I did tell them it's a org key starting with 1010, so that would be basically general fund. But I just want to say that out publicly, because most people don't get don't read through the entire agenda packet. And I just want to say that, yes, that right now is coming from 1010, and then if there's any discussion on that from anybody in the public, then feel free.
Very well.
Chair, has there been any conversation with BLM about potential reimbursement or what that financial picture would look like with them, or are they just ignoring it completely? I know you've had conversations with them.
We have, if I might, we have had, we're on furlough, and they're back trying to catch up, and we'll see what they're doing on Friday. But we've had to have that. They don't have the funds, but we did talk to Neil O'Connell, our lobbyist back in Washington, D.C., and she is continuing to push on this. So we will submit an invoice to BLM, see how that flies with them.
Okay.
I'm glad to hear that, yeah. That's definitely one of the major concerns from...
I don't think we ought to hold our breath that they're going to pay it back, but we should ask.
We should push for it, yes.
Agreed.
The bottom line is that these are trees that needed to probably come down anyway, correct?
BLM, yes, needed.
And is it a health and safety issue by leaving them standing in those locations? Probably yes. So the reality is, if they don't want to take care of their property, if we need to take care of it for them, then we're taking care of it. We're reducing the hazard to the community. So I would expect that maybe we even get our congressman involved if we have to help push the issue.
And Supervisor Mills, Congressman McClintock has been aware of this and has been helping, but, it's a big elephant to push upstairs.
I understand.
Never mind. I see public comment.
Yes, I just really want to remind this board and the public that this item is here today because this board directed staff to bring it to us through a study session that was presented by Josh, our Public Works Director. So this is the outcome of that study session and direction to staff to do this.
Thank you very much. Seeing no more comments from the board, I'll open to public comment. Ms. Newman?
I just wanted to say, good job. It says from contingencies. I didn't have to ask. And if the last agenda item would have said no county monies involved, that would have been a help too. But this was very well explained. Thank you.
Supervisor, Mr. Zagala.
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. I appreciate the work that's been done, and I wasn't aware of the degree of effort to try to get BLM to be responsible for their trees. And I think last time this was brought up, I suggested that we write to the President of the United States and let it trickle down. That didn't deliver very well. So our board decided, our Taxpayer Association board, decided we should write. And in preparing to do so, we contacted our congressman's office, and he suggested a little different way of going to the department responsible for the interior. And so we're putting together a letter, and since we want to make sure that it's effective, we're thinking twice and writing once. So we're getting some eyes looking at that, so we don't have to write another letter to explain what the first letter intended. But anyway, we really appreciate the effort that's being done to hold the Bureau of Land Management accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment, Mr. Favre?
Mike Falvey, District 2, just a couple observations. Starting with our congressman, Mr. McClintock, forget it. Don't even bother wasting the ink. BLM, they kind of fall into the same category. I spoke on this subject when it first came up in front of you. You could clear cut a 40-acre parcel that they own, and they probably wouldn't even realize it. So don't plan on getting the money back. Don't plan on anybody from Washington coming to back you up on this, but get it done because it's a public safety hazard. There's a lot of worse things to spend money on than this. Thank you.
Further public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Back to board discussion. I'd like to thank Josh for his work in getting this done in the last. We gave you a short timeline and you got the job done. Thank you. And I appreciate the work that you've been doing to outreach to local contractors to get things lined up, and appreciate it. And we will continue to fight back in Washington, D.C. And compliments to Ms. O'Connell, who is a real warrior in there for us. If anybody's going to get that money out of D.C., and believe me, it will. Supervisor Stopper?
With that, I'd like to move this.
Moved by Supervisor Stopper.
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Item 14.
Item 14 is from the Auditor Controller to adopt an ordinance rescinding and replacing Property Value Ordinance Section 2.60.005 of the County Code and authorize a summary publication.
Thank you. Supervisor Mills.
The only reason this is pulled is because in the discussion summary, do we have the right date?
Well, we put the date of when it was actually introduced.
In 2018?
Oh, it should have been 19, yeah.
So I'm only asking that we correct the discussion
Yeah.
summary to reflect 2019, not 2018.
Yep.
Is it correct in the resolution? Okay.
So the resolution is correct.
The resolution is
That's what we're
correct.
voting on.
Correct. The resolution is correct as written.
It's an ordinance, not a resolution.
Oh,
It's for-
okay.
Correct.
That's it.
Very well, we'll have public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a discussion or a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Mills, second by Supervisor Stopper. Call vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Item 15 is from the Elections Department to adopt a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement between the Secretary of State and the County of Calaveras in the amount of $199,500 for the purpose of providing state reimbursement funds to assist in the purchase of a new voting system as appropriated by Assembly Bill 1824, Chapter 8, Stats 2018, pursuant to Elections Code 19400 and 19402.
Supervisor Mills.
Yes, I'd like to hear from Ms. Turner the options that we might have with this and why this decision's made to go forward at this time with looking for these funds.
So, Rebecca Turner, County Clerk Recorder and Registrar of Voters. Good morning, Board. The state has allocated each county with so much money to purchase a new voting system, and that was the amount that was allocated to us. They sent us a contract that was due back within 10 days to accept our allocated amount. We're not actually doing anything with the funds at this time besides accepting them. Yes, we would like this money for our county.
So what are the strings attached to it?
At this point, there's no strings attached unless we plan on spending the money, which at this point, I would have to come back before you to request to purchase a new voting system. So at this time, there's no strings. We do have to have a match when we choose to spend the funds. And we have roughly 150,000 HAVA funds that could be used as a match for the state funds. And that would put the county, if we spent the full amount of the grant, at $50,000, which again, I haven't budgeted for at this time. It would be in my budget for next year if I was planning to move forward with a system, and I'd be back before you guys to talk about that.
In the discussion, it talks about certification standards.
There's 3 voting systems that currently are certified by the state of California, Dominion, Hard Enter Civic, and ES&S, which is our current vendor.
Yeah, it's on page 237 of my packet, but my concern is that it also states in the discussion that if the Secretary of State determines that the system we put in place is not acceptable, that we, in essence, will have to give back all of the money which they've given us.
Correct, which is why we would only look at systems that are currently certified by the state.
I'm really having some issues with electronic poll books listed on page 221. And the reason is that the state of California, especially DMV, has not been exactly an exemplary idea of how to put together a computerized system. And I see this as potentially disenfranchising voters. I think that the testing that they're talking about here is almost a trust me that it will work kind of situation. And I do have grave concerns. If what we're working, the system we have is old and outdated, is it because of its accuracy issues or is it because of its timing issues? What is the reasons for wanting to move away from what we're doing now?
So the system we're currently on is not certified by the state. So we'd want to move away from it to get to a system that is certified by the state. We're still allowed to use it because it was certified at the time we purchased it. But until you're in a situation when you're running an election and our system doesn't work, I can't say, yes, we have to get a system at this time. I don't want to put the county in a position where we have a system that's, to us, 15 years old. However, it's outdated using dot matrix printers from the 80s. So I really don't want to be the person in charge of elections, putting the county in a situation where all of a sudden we can't count ballots because it's not running. So yes, right now it is working. I would like to say that of our voting system at all times. So I think we need to move forward towards a new voting system so we're not in that situation where our voting system doesn't work.
And you've heard this term before, and probably not from me, about clean voter rolls.
I have heard about clean voter rolls, and I would say that our voter rolls are probably one of the cleanest in the state. Yes, DMV now puts in registration cards, which is not within our control. It's the state law. So mentioning DMV, yes, that's our number one problem on election day, is that the accuracy of some of the registration cards put in by DMV is a problem. We try to stay on top of it. Whenever we know there's an issue, we review our voter rolls, and voters are not put in who should not be put in as far as we're aware. However, DMV is currently being audited for their own accuracy at a state level, and I believe there may be voters that are not in the system that should be.
And it's the accuracy that I'm very concerned about. You know, when I hear that Los Angeles County is having to purge 1.5 million voters from their rolls because of a lawsuit, that it took a lawsuit to get that done, that leads me to believe that the state has a problem. If we're going to turn all this over to the state and say they're the ones that have the final authority of what that voter roll looks like, and they've already admitted that they can't control it.
My understanding for why they're having to remove those voters is because they don't send out their 3PCUA cards that removes their inactive voters, which we have always done. So it's not the same scenario for us as it is LA. As far as poll books go, that's not necessarily in the same, getting a new voting system does not mean they're new poll books. Poll books would be a separate purchase, and it's entirely separate. A voting system would be simply our vote counting equipment, and that doesn't impact our election management system either, which has voter registration. So they're two separate systems, and we don't plan on changing our current election management system, which houses the voter registration information.
Is this an attempt to get ready for HR 1?
For SB 450,
I'm talking about the recent House Resolution number 1, which was the very first act that was done by the House in Washington, D.C. People need to go look at what HR 1 is and what it represents, because I think that there's a dichotic shift that's going to occur with something like that. So
this is in preparation to prevent us having a failed voting system, and it's also in preparation of the possibility of moving forward with vote centers in 2020, if not 2022. So at this point, the only thing that the elections department is looking at is replacing the voting system.
Thank you.
Supervisor Stafford.
I'm sorry. I just had one question, Rebecca. Have you researched the actual cost of any of these three newer systems at all?
We're in the middle of putting together an RFP right now, which we're hoping to go out in March, and in that time I'll have a better idea of what the cost is.
Thank you.
Just one more, Rebecca. I was going over this because when Dennis started asking his questions, he asked about restrictions, and the restriction is you have to put this money towards the new voting system. So it is restricted money. So I was just looking at the routing form, and it's going into org key 10100100, which is a general fund org key. Is that? No? That's separate?
It would be going, so we wouldn't be getting any funds at this time. All it's doing is yes, we're agreeing to this allocation. We would like to take this money. We do not receive any funds until we've expended funds, at which time we will be reimbursed.
Thank you for the clarity. Thank you. That's all.
And again, to the point, reimbursed only if we meet the conditions that the Secretary of State has set forth for these expenditures.
Correct. We would have to do that.
Okay.
Very well. No other comments from the board? Public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board for a discussion or motion.
Chair, I really can't support this at this time. I think the bottom line cost and what the direction is that this is going to take is quite onerous, and I will not be voting in favor of it.
I will move this item.
There's a motion by Supervisor.
I'll second it.
Second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
4 in favor, 1 opposed. Supervisor Mills is the opposed. So, thank you. We're going to take a 10-minute break right now. So we'll be coming back here at 10:20. Thank you very much.
Number 19 is from Code Compliance to authorize the county abatement and assessment lien for the recovery of costs of the abatement pursuant to citation issued to Jesse Rodriguez Jr. in case number 2009 regarding 126 South Railroad Flat Road, Railroad Flat.
Supervisor Mills.
Can you just click it off for me? Thank you.
I'm sorry about the audio out back. If you could let people know that if they want to make public comment, they're going to have to be on top of it because we can't communicate back and forth. I can hear that. Nice Spinal Tap reference. All right, let's bring this meeting back to order. Supervisor Mills.
Chair, what I would like to do is to bring all of these code cases into a singular discussion if it is possible, because what I want to deal with here deals with all of them, and I think it's more of a policy matter than it is a procedure matter.
I guess that's, are we within our bounds, or is that, can we talk about a policy issue, or just these specific items?
Only on these specific items. As far as hearing them all together, the board, you certainly have the discretion to do that. The public just needs to be given an opportunity to speak on each or all of them before taking action.
Supervisor Mills, maybe we'll focus on one, and we could add the right questions to bloom out the right.
That would be fine. That would be fine. I would agree. So the issue at hand here is that we are asking for an assessment of a lien for recovery costs. And my concern is that I understand there's two issues here. One is in order to abate, and you want to find a way to recover those costs. I just had a recent back and forth email regarding a property in District 4. I think that the board needs to be fully cognizant of what are the accrued costs and fines and penalties to this point when these kind of items are brought before us, so we know what that lien amount generally is going to be before it's applied. And if it's a case of taking and approving you going out to do an abatement and the costs associated with that abatement, that is one activity. The applying of a lien without knowing what the costs of that lien application are, that's quite another. So I want to be sure that we know what are we talking about here on numbers before we approve as a board to assess a lien on a property. We could potentially put that property upside down and never be able to recover any costs at all. So I think it just needs to be two separate discussions. Yes, I agree. You need to go out and do the abatements. You've worked to that level. But what those costs are in applying a lien is a totally separate issue in my world.
Good morning, Ethan Turner. I'm the attorney for Code Compliance. As we discussed briefly during the break, the section that deals with this is Government Code 25845. It requires a board hearing prior to the assessment of a lien to recover the cost of an abatement. And I understand the question you're raising, and it's sort of a chicken and egg type of scenario, because an abatement order shouldn't really be carried out by Code Compliance if they don't know that they're going to recover their costs. In this case, all of the abatement orders that are being requested today are cleanups of illegal cannabis cultivation sites that were eradicated pursuant to search warrants. These are just, this is the junk and debris in abandoned employee campsites that were present during the illegal cannabis cultivation that occurred over the previous summer. Code compliance brings forth a request for the issuance of an abatement order, and once it's approved by the board, they can get a abatement warrant, and then go out and clean up the site, and they can use that order that you've already issued to get a lien. If they do an abatement order and then have to come back to ask whether or not they can pay for it, you can see where that could be a problem occasionally. As to the typical cost of an abatement, a junk and debris type of cleanup, including hauling off of vehicles, can vary. Usually costs, based on prior experience, $8,000 to $10,000, and that becomes an assessment lien on the property for total cost recovery.
So, Mr. Turner, none of these properties in question here have accrued any fines or penalties to this point, is that correct?
No, they were just given a notice of violation citation in order to abate, and the property owners were all notified that they needed to be cleaned up. None of them were cleaned up, and none of them availed themselves of an opportunity to have an appeal before the Administrative Hearing Board and then before the board. So they have failed to exhaust their administrative remedies. The initial preliminary orders of the code compliance officers were that there is a violation and it needs to be abated. Those preliminary orders were not appealed, so they're now final, and we're just asking the board for the statutory requirement of its approval to carry out these abatements.
Could you possibly put an estimated cost, now you just mentioned it verbally, in the future code compliance agenda items, could you put an estimated cost in there so that the board actually and the public knows what those potential amounts can be?
Yes, I'm getting a nod from one of the code compliance officers. He can provide estimates for his staff reports in the future.
Thank you.
Supervisor Callaway.
Fines are not included in the lien, are they?
They are not. Fines are not included in the lien. The government code only allows the assessment liens to cover actual costs of abatement.
Thank you.
Supervisor Stopper.
I just want to clarify that all of these are contingent on the fact that they had illegal farms during the ban and they were abated. These other issues that were cited at the same time, illegal camping and so on, are because they were abated of marijuana, and those are things that were cited while they were on the property.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No, I'm just wanting to be sure that we do have some clarity on these costs as we are making decisions. We don't have any dollars in front of us. We don't know what it is.
It makes sense, and code compliance is cognizant of the possibility that sometimes you can over-encumber a property, and at which time it gets sold at a tax lien sale, and the government might not recover all of its costs.
Sometimes that's the reason people continue to violate, and code compliance goes out there, because they don't count on continuing having the property in the future.
Right.
Ms. Callen, you came to the podium, so obviously you have something to say on this.
So I just want to reiterate, there's no fines that will be liened. It doesn't mean that code compliance can't continue collection methods in an alternative manner with county council to get the fines, but they will not be an assessment on the property itself. And then we've also isolated a way to track the costs in terms of contractors that would actually go out and do abatement. So those physical costs would be part of the backup that comes to my office in terms of what the lien amount would be. And I would say, trying to identify what the costs are going to be in a staff packet, I think that they can give you a ballpark, but each property is going to be very different in what the ultimate cost would be. So I would just want to make sure that we're not being so definitive in the staff report, because really we haven't gone forward with the physical abatement, so we really don't know what the true costs would be. So it's actual abatement costs and then also actual documented staff time. Both of those can actually be assessed on the property. And then this is a teetered program. So what will happen is even though it goes on the parcel as an assessment lien and they get a bill for it, we go ahead and teeter it. So code compliance gets the money regardless of whether it's paid or not. That lien will stay on the property until it gets paid by the property owner or until it goes to a tax sale. And then if it goes to a tax sale and it ends up being a loss because property taxes generally stop getting paid because they can't pay the code lien or they're not going to. Once it goes to a tax sale, property taxes are paid first. Whatever's left over can be paid off. And so if it's a loss, that loss would be absorbed by the teeter program.
So each one of them is very different, and I understand that. That's why I'm just asking that we have some type of a ballpark number here when we're bringing these items up so the board can see what it is we're dealing with. That's all I was asking for.
Supervisor Hoppe, you have another question?
Yeah, I have one more. Maybe Sabrina can answer this. In the last year, how many abatements of illegal marijuana farms do we have on the books so far by code compliance?
For this fiscal year?
For not this fiscal year, I'm just saying in the last year or so.
I believe since last April, we've done one for cannabis, yeah.
Well, okay.
Are there any more of these that you intend to bring forward that need to be,
Non-cannabis related?
well, abatements in general?
Yeah,
yes.
we have 4 officers working full-time in their respective districts, and they all have pending abatements in the pipeline.
Okay.
So those will be coming on future agendas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments from the board, public comment? Ms. Newman?
This may have been covered, but I didn't catch it. Does abatement and assessment include the loss of property? Do they lose their property if they're not able to pay their abatement and assessment? And if that happens, does it become county property to be auctioned off? Is that how that process works?
We'll have a rebuttal at the end. Ms. Newman will answer specific questions. We'll go through public comment, and then you guys can go up and answer the specifics.
My question is, thank you guys for doing this. I'm very proud to say I'm a Calaveras resident now because I can see it's starting to move forward. The question I have is, you cannot tell me that somewhere in the state of California there's not someone going through the same thing in their county. You cannot tell me that there's not people that are bidding jobs like this for other counties. There's got to be some kind of a budgeting example somewhere in some other county that is going through abatements like this. I know they're all different. I understand there's 40 cars compared to 2 cars. I understand there's 400 plants compared to 4,000 plants. But you know what, you guys, there's somewhere out there, there's research on this funding on how much these things cost. I agree with Dennis. We need to see what it's going to cost us. This should also come up in the current discussion we're going to have with the new marijuana laws. If we're going to have marijuana here, that needs to be part of it. So I just wanted to find out, why hasn't anybody reached out to talk to other counties of what they're doing about this? Because I'm sure other people have got the same situation.
Mr. McManus?
I just want to agree with Supervisor Mills that we've been chasing numbers for a couple of years now on what the costs are for cleanup, abatement, and other things associated with the marijuana industry. And I also agree that if you don't know what the cost is, why are you moving forward with a approval to put an unknown lien on a property? And until it's accomplished, you won't know what the total is. If they're going through and actually doing the cleanup, what if they find something else? What if there's a hazmat situation that comes up? You know, that's like Final Jeopardy. All the amounts, go, way up if they have to clean that up. Now, if we want to do it looking at it backwards, I'm hoping that the board will suggest to the auditor-controller that these numbers be kept pristine and available. For instance, if I were to ask for a list of invoices from Dirty Works, which is a company that does a lot of our cleanup, would they be able to provide a copy of the invoice, not just a total, but where they went and what they did on every site that Dirty Works showed up at? by county direction. And I think there's a few other contractors out there besides Dirty Works that were contracted to come in, haul pot off, do different things. Do we have identity for how much that cost and where it was at? So that we don't say, well, it was just, another grow and it cost $8,000 to $10,000. Some of them could be a lot more than that. And it may be based on the area, the size, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. That's the only way we're going to be able to get an idea of what this huge failed experiment is costing this county. And the numbers just seem to vaporize right now, and we don't have any way of reconstructing those costs or trying to get it straight. So I understand that what this is abatement only, but we haven't gotten to the cleanup, if there's any cleanup, and how much is that going to cost, and when do we find out, and when can we start putting those numbers together? Because if we start going forward with another failed policy to allow regulation, we're going to have those numbers before you make a decision. And right now, those numbers, they exist, but they seem to be unknown. They seem to be outside the reach of the public to get a hold of. I don't know if the supervisors have any better idea of what those numbers are, but I have been trying for 2 years to get those numbers, and so far, can't get them. So anyway, thank you.
Ms. Rickey, were you speaking?
I think it's a matter of opinion that the UO was a failed policy. There were problems, but it actually brought in $13.7 million to the general fund through Measure C taxes. I also think that you may find that it won't cost that much at all if people were farming outside of the ban, but chances are they were using organic materials, and it would cost far less to abate some of these properties. Thank you.
Let's try to focus on the agenda item.
I've happened to have seen a couple of the properties in question and also looked through the agenda packet at the pictures of the ones that I haven't. And from what I've seen, if it would have only cost $8,000 to $10,000 to clean it up, the property owner would have done it. I can't even conceive of how much it would cost to do a complete abatement on all the things listed, including, it makes me wonder, some of them have pretty sad buildings on them, and I wonder, does the abatement of these condemned buildings include tearing them down and hauling them away, or are we just displacing the resident and leaving the hazard in place? And I also have a question that probably code could answer, well, a lot of people could, but I looked at one of them in the agenda packet this morning, and they listed 6 offenses, each $100 a day fine for, I believe, 30 days, and that would have been $24,000 just on its face right there. That's not part of the lien, apparently. But my question about that is, at what point do the fines begin to accrue? Have they already accrued during the period between when the person got issued a notice of violation and now, or do they begin to accrue now going forward after the individuals have been, had a lien assessed? Is that when they begin? So I'd like to know that. And also, as a member of the public, I went through the 800 and some odd page agenda packet trying to get answers to some of these questions, and there's a lot that isn't there. And I understand that a lot of that is because I couldn't look at their appeal hearings because they didn't have appeals. And lastly, I was under the impression that district supervisors were going to act as code liaisons with people who were in violation and had problems to try to avoid them being here now where we are today. And the couple of folks that I've spoken with had never heard from a SUP, and there may be reasons for that that I'm unaware of, but it seems like it would be helpful, and thank you.
Further public comment? Al?
Yeah. Al Scala, Taxpayer Association. I kind of agree with Dennis. It seems like we want to have an idea of what the costs are before we authorize expenditures. It just seems to make sense. It seems to be good government. What you might consider doing is ask the co-compliance to provide an estimate of the cleanup, whether the cleanup is the same thing as mitigation or I'm not sure, but it should be an estimate, and if they are not able to make an estimate, perhaps a firm that's familiar with that could make an estimate, and that could be provided to the Board of Supervisors, which will give an indication of the amount of money that that would be involved. Seems to make sense. Thank you.
Ms. Gordo. How many more speakers do we have? If you could raise your hand. Very well, you'll be the last speaker.
I think that the people that are organizing this thing need to have set figures. And if they don't, it's a Machiavellian effort to not catch our citizens that find themselves in a dire situation. And I feel sad about that.
Thank you. With that, we'll close public comment. Staff, do you want to any rebuttal or further comments from the public comments?
I'm trying to remember what the question was with regards to, so for purposes of putting this assessment lien on, there's no difference between a cannabis abatement or, a building that's falling over or anything, any type of health and safety issue that rises to the level that code compliance would have to go out and do an administrative citation qualifies to reach the point where there would need to be an assessment lien. It's really at the discretion of the building official with code compliance staff to determine if it rises to that level of a health and safety issue. At that point, that's really a policy decision, and then there is no taxpayer. There's no taxpayer cost because once you put that assessment lien on, it is specific to that property and that property owner. So at the time that it goes to sale, there's a 5-year window of non-payment. Once you've gone 5 years without making your property tax payments, that triggers a tax sale. So it doesn't become the property of the county so much as it basically needs to go to auction in order to try to recoup the costs that we are required to collect, i.e. the property taxes and any code violation liens. There could be direct charges from sanitary districts. There's a multitude of different types of liens that get put onto properties, right? So once that happens and it goes to that lien sale, then that's when you go and you make a bid on the property, and we're trying to get those charges all paid for in that lien sale. If there's adequate funding to actually have the sale go through that covers everything, there will be what's called an excess proceeds. That excess proceeds would go to, is available to be claimed by the property owner or whoever the legal claimant could be on those excess proceeds. If there is no claimant for the excess proceeds, those excess proceeds would actually go to the county general fund. If there is a loss on the tax sale, then the teeter program, using penalties and interest that has been accumulated through the tax loss reserve program, will fund the loss. It is kind of a balancing act because we obviously, as the county, are using the teeter funded or the teeter program's penalties and interest in order to use a whole slew of things for the general fund. So you have to just be mindful that it is a teetered program. So if we are running into a lot more activity with code compliance, then there is potentially a lot more statistical possibility of having sales tax losses as opposed to excess proceeds. But it's just kind of a crapshoot, for lack of a better term. It's not funded by the taxpayer, like I said, so this is very specific to a particular property and taxpayer who owns that property, or a bank if it went into foreclosure, so whoever the legal owner is of that property. And in terms of costs, it really just depends. Every single assessment that we've ever gotten is different. And it's because whatever they come across. We have a very difficult time finding auto hauler dismantlers to come up into our area. So we can't really compare what a cost would be in San Joaquin County to cleaning up a property in Calaveras, because we can't get all of the vendors locally. We might have to go out of the area to get them. So it just really is, each one will have to be dealt with separately. And, I do agree it would be helpful for us just to kind of at least get an idea roundabout in the staff report. It might also be helpful, part of the comments that are being made is, well, what are the fines that have accumulated to date? That might also be helpful. But again, it's understanding those will not be assessed.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board or staff?
To follow up with that, so we're running for this type of work on the teeter fund, so there could be as many as 5 years before there's realization on the return.
Yeah, it's treated, the assessment lien is treated exactly like property tax. And so the assessment lien goes on there, it appears on the property tax bill. There has to be 5 years of delinquency before the tax collector sells the property.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I had one other point of clarification. These abatements were all done by law enforcement. And the law enforcement search warrant abatements are not subject to liens. Those are just paid for by the sheriff's department.
Supervisor Mills?
Again, I would like to just be sure that when these appear, that I have a good, clear understanding of what are the fines and penalties to this point, even though they're not going to be on a lien. I just need to know what that number is and your estimated cost to abate. I have a difficult time in assessing a lien without knowing what that potential lien cost could be. So that's just something that has to be here. I would bifurcate this group with a series of motions if necessary, because I have no problem with the abatement itself, but I have a real problem with putting liens on properties of which I do not know what the number is.
I understand. The code compliance officers have a long track record of abatements and invoices from the contractors who handled them, and the officers who handled each one of these cases have inspected the sites, so they all should have a pretty good idea and should be able to provide that kind of information to you.
Thank you. And this will be probably the first time I've ever complimented a public speaker, but Tom, I want to thank you for your very succinct discussion. I think it was very helpful to the overall conversation. I appreciate it.
Supervisor Stomper? Very well. Is there further discussion or a motion from the board?
Chair, I would like to move the order to abate and to hold back on the assessment lien until such time as we know what those costs are.
There's a motion to, could you say that one more time?
I would make a motion that we authorize the county to abate this property and to withhold on the assessment motion until such time as we know what those costs are.
I'm sorry, what is the assessment?
That's item number 19. The motion would be that...
So you want to not clean it and not lien it?
We're not going to place the lien on the property until we know what those costs are.
I will look for a second for that, but...
I got some comment. I'm sitting here and I was just... I don't know where this is going, because you can also, on the other side of the coin, say, well, you know what, I want to know what the value of that property is too. Bring that to us, because I want to know if the cost is going to be more than the value of the property, and if so, then only do abatement to the cost of the property. where are we going with this? I don't know. The property needs to be cleaned up. We don't know the cost, so we can give you somewhat of an estimate, probably, like I can when I'm bidding something, the cost of something to do when you're doing renovation work. But the true cost, you don't know until you get in and you clean it up. And then you get the invoices in, and you can total what it costs. But if you're going to go down this path of wanting to do this, what you're talking about, the other side of the coin again is how much is the value of the property? Well, you know, it's going to cost $58,000 to clean it, but the property's only worth $30,000. So do we only do $30,000 worth of cleanup? I mean, what difference? If it needs to be cleaned up, it needs to be cleaned up. That's what this is all about. But you can go down that route, but trying to make a motion, I would not support the motion as it is. I think going forward, this is to basically let's get it cleaned up, and in the future, if you want something brought, staff has agreed to bring something forward in the future with the cost of it, the estimated cost of the cleanup on it forward.
Thank you. Is there further discussion or a second on the motion that's before us? Is there a second? And is it seeing no second? The motion fails.
I would move this item, Mr. Chair, as is.
Motion by Supervisor Toffenali.
I want a clarification. Supervisor Toffenali, would that be all of the code abatement ones?
Yes.
19.
19 through 23.
We're going to have to go through.
We have to go through each one. Okay, so this would be on item 19.
Is that clear? Okay.
Item 19.
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Toffenali, a second by Supervisor Callaway. Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. 4 in favor, 1 opposed. Supervisor Mills. Moving on to item number 19.
No, 20.
Excuse me, 20.
I move number 20.
But we have to go through the
sorry.
process.
Item 20 is from Code Compliance to authorize county abatement and assessment lien for the recovery of costs of the abatement pursuant to citation issued to Conrad Giebelwitz regarding 200 Indian Ridge Road, McCollum Hill.
Supervisor Mills, approve this item.
Only to continue the discussion from item number 19, so the same would apply to item 20.
Very well.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
It would be to County Council. If Madam Clerk was to read items number 20, 21, 22, and 23 right now,
Can we combine them?
and then we can move forward, if there's any comment in each one of those, and then we could get a full motion for the rest of them. Is that acceptable?
Certainly, that's fine. Again, the public just has to be given an opportunity. You could arguably say, we're going to take public comment on items 20, 21, 22, and 23 at this time, so any comments from the public, please have your comments for all of those items now. But for purposes of the system that we work, as far as motions, it's easier to have an actual motion. I mean, I suppose if you were to do it all in one, you could do it, and then Diane would just essentially have the same mover, the same seconder, and the same vote for all of them. If the board wanted to have, for instance, a different mover, a different seconder, I would recommend you do it each item at a time for purposes of our systems.
Well, my point is that it would be a mini consent. We do consent all at one time, and so if we identify those 20 through 23 as like a mini consent.
Supervisor Toffenali, I agree with you, and I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I'm worried because we continually get hammered on our procedures and Brown Act, it might just be shorter in the long run, just to, well, stay.
Your chair, so I just brought it up.
I would like to move through it and avoid tying everything up. Very well, move to public comment, sir.
Good morning, Conrad Giebelwitz, item number 20. I'm just trying to get familiar with the process here. I've already done all sorts of cleanup work. I'm going to speak to somebody today about, the details involved to be fully 100% compliant with the county. So I just want to make my presence known today and make sure that, you realize or understand that, I'm on top of it and I'm doing the best I can and I'm pretty much there. So I don't know what else to say besides I'm also going to be hiring an attorney to represent me in the future here. So
here I am, and that's what I had to say, so,
Thank you.
thanks.
So other public comment on this item? Tom?
Comment and question on this item and the process, as I understand the idea of if you were trying to combine the four like items on the consent agenda into one. I believe it sounds to me like then that would be trying to limit each public comment to 3 minutes on all four items, not allowing us to comment on them individually, which would be 12 minutes. I don't like that, just say that. And I also just wanted to comment that decisions with so much impact on the people, it's like Conrad who just got up here, I was a little bit appalled to see them on the consent agenda, that they just get moved through with a stroke of a pen with no discussion. The public isn't even aware of the stakes involved. And something with so much human impact on people, I think deserves to not be on the consent agenda. And I think, one comment that Ethan Turner made about law enforcement doing the abatement, that's true on the criminal portion, but having seen a couple of the sites in question, I can tell you for sure that all law enforcement abates is they cut the plants. They don't clean up the mess, they don't haul away the hundreds of pots or any of that. That apparently becomes an expense in the form of, a contract with like Dirty Works that will be part of the code enforcement cost of doing the abatement. I just wanted to point out that when you say law enforcement performed the abatement, they just chopped plants. And in this case, I was also interested that the fine was written out explicitly, $250 per plant, which at first I thought, that sounds like the new never got past 8.06 fine, but it isn't. It's a separate affair, so you probably can't answer it, but I'll try to ask the sheriff how they happened to arrive at that identical number. And that's all my comment for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further public comment? How many public speakers do we have on this item specifically? If you raise your hand. Bill, now you'll be the last two speakers.
I almost went ahead of somebody else. House of Gala Taxpayer Association. It looks like on this item 20, we have a property owner who's claiming substantial compliance, and we may have a communications problem. Perhaps we would want to ask code compliance for their facts on the case. In other words, what has been done and what amount of money is involved.
Thank you. Mr. McManus.
I just wanted to continue on with something Supervisor Tofinelli mentioned, that when you start considering what the costs are or the estimate to clean up a piece of property versus the value of the property, that is probably the very last consideration that you want to take a look at. The very first consideration you want to take a look at is the safety of people in the area, what's going on with the property, and if it's going to cost more than the property is worth to clean it up and make it safe for its neighbors, for waterways, streams, birds, plants, you name it. That is the first priority. That property has to be cleaned up, and it has to be cleaned up properly. You can't leave a toxic site sitting out in the public and say, well, we never would have recovered the money to pay for it. Tough. You've got to clean it up. Along with some of the other issues, it's too bad we don't have like a clearinghouse or repository for all this information, because there still are many parts to what the cost is. The Sheriff's Department does whatever they do. They incur their costs. Whether it gets passed on or not, we don't know. Code Compliance does the same thing. We also have state agencies that come in, like Department of Fish and Wildlife, HIDAT, DOJ, IRS. They come in and take action on this, and there's a formula for the county to get a share of the funds or the fines that the feds pick up by doing this. Where do we account for that money? Do we know what we're getting off some of these interactions or inaction by the federal government or the state government? We don't know. And when you talk about, well, it's going to take 5 years before you can sell property, I think that if you go back and look, the county cannot force the sale of a property after 5 years of non-payment of property taxes if a bankruptcy is in place. That freezes that action right there, and it goes on forever until the bankruptcy is settled, because now it's under the control of a court. So I don't think you can say, well, in 5 years we're going to be able to do all this. I don't know that that's always going to be the case. But again, this illustrates how many pieces there are in this puzzle. And if we're ever going to get an idea of moving ahead with some other plan, all these pieces have to be brought together. We have to know what the income is, what the cost is, what the exposure is to the county, what the exposure is to the public. All of that has to be considered. You can't just willy-nilly say, well, we're going to pay this, this one's going to happen over there, we'll put this one off for 5 years. Everything gets lost. It just turns to vapor. And then every time we look at this, we have to recreate the wheel by going back and trying to rebuild what the costs were on every single project. And I hope that the board does something to kind of consolidate this action. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Are there any questions, further questions for staff or a motion?
I'll move all these items.
We're going to go one at a time.
Okay, I'll start out with 20.
I just have a, normally code enforcement is quite generous in the time frames that they give people. And if the property owner in this case is doing something, I'm assuming code enforcement is going to take that in consideration.
Good morning, Sabrina Cable, Code Compliance again. I just wanted to state for the record that the property owner was issued a non-punitive notice of violation on October 23rd, 2018. The property owner signed for it on October 25th, 2018, and today is the first time that we've heard from him. We have not received any evidence of cleanup, but we're more than happy to work with him from here on out to avoid the county having to abate, which is always our preference.
Your usual modus operandi.
Correct.
Thank you.
So we're looking for
Before you walk away then, so what you're basically telling us is that although the board may authorize an abatement action here, does not necessarily mean that will occur.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any comments from the board or a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Supervisor Callaway. We have a first by Supervisor Stopper, a second by Supervisor Callaway. Further discussion? Seeing none. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
4-1. Supervisor Mills opposed. Item 21.
Item 21 is from Code Compliance to authorize county abatement assessment lien for the recovery of costs of the abatement pursuant to citation issued to Fidel Gomez Jr. regarding 608 Smitty Lane, West Point.
Very well. Supervisor Mills, you pulled the item.
Discussion is the same as the previous two.
Very well. Further discussion by the board. Public comment?
Just one question for my comment, if you would be so kind as to ask staff to clarify for the public. Like Sabrina Cable just said, that they issued a non-punitive notice of violation, and that if Supervisor Mills, I believe, just got, or we somehow got clarity that you're authorizing the abatement order doesn't necessarily mean it will go ahead. Do the fines begin to accrue at what point do the fines begin to accrue? That's the question I'd like to get clear on, if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Further information from staff?
Fines begin to assess as stipulated once an administrative citation is issued. Our current administrative citation is a 3-in-1 notice, which is a secondary notice of violation, order to abate, an administrative citation. And typically, depending on severity of violations, we're giving 20 days notice on that citation before fines assess. So in this case, the Smitty Lane property in the previous item, they were given non-punitive notices of violation, which inform you of the violations on the property, what can be done to abate the violations, and what escalating enforcement will occur if you don't comply with that notice. So then a secondary notice of violation, order to abate, and admin citation is issued, giving 20 more days, and on the 21st day is when fines assess. Hope that
That's when
clarifies.
on the 21st day is when they begin?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good.
Thank you. Bring it back to the board. Is there further discussion or motion on item 21?
I'll move this item, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Supervisor Coffinelli,
Second.
second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
4-1, Supervisor Mills opposing. Item 22.
Item 22 is from Code Compliance to authorize county abatement and assessment lien for the recovery of costs of the abatement pursuant to citation issued to Jagat Pavritam Dasa in case number 2211 regarding the property located at 4600 Esmeralda Road, Murphy's.
Supervisor Mills, you pulled this item.
Discussion is same as before.
Very well. Further discussion by the board? Public comment. Anybody like to comment on item 22? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Further discussion or motion?
So move.
Moved by Supervisor Callaway. Second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No?
4-1, Supervisor Mills opposed. Item number 23.
Item 23 is from Code Compliance. Authorize county abatement and assessment lien for the recovery of costs of the abatement pursuant to citation issued to Tao Michael et al. In case 2271 regarding the property located at APN 020-001-053 on Blossom Lane in Railroad Flat.
Supervisor Mills, you pulled this item.
Discussion same as before.
Very well. Board discussion or questions? Is there public comments on item 23? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion.
I'll move this one.
Moved by Supervisor Stopper. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Callaway. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Carries 4-1. Supervisor Mills voting against. All right. We'll move on to,
Item 33.
now we're going to move those to after the OES. Item number 33.
Item 33 is from the Administrative Office to authorize purchase order to Big Valley Ford of Stockton, California in the amount of $42,567 for the purchase of one F-250 crew cab four-wheel drive for marine safety, non-general fund, AB 443.
Chair, we've got too much conversation going on.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. If we could keep conversation down, everybody, it makes it easier for us to hear and work up here. Ms. Newman, you pulled this item?
I just had a comment. On this agenda item, it says non-general fund money, so that answers what I was requesting before, and I thank you for that designation.
Thank you. So further, very well, board discussion?
I do have a question, since I noticed that we've, do you have a moment? Yes, sir.
Captain Ballard.
Well, I just thought I'd catch you with this question. I noticed that Ford is now coming up with a reinforced rear section to the F-150s and the Explorers on their police packages. Is this going to be something that will be included on the F-250 that you're purchasing, or is...
No, it'll be used just primarily for towing the boats, and that's it.
Okay, and the reason for Ford to do that was because of the rear-end collisions to make them safe up to 70 miles an hour being hit from the rear?
I would imagine so, sir. I just buy them.
Yeah, it's something they just came up with in the last couple of weeks. So I just was wondering if that was included on this F-250. Okay. It's not. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from the board? Seeing none, is there public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a motion for the call it?
So moved.
Supervisor Mills.
Second.
Supervisor Mills, second by Supervisor Stopper. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Can could we just take a couple minutes so they can set up?
Let's all stand up for 5 minutes.
Item 36 is from the Office of Emergency Services. Receive an update on disaster recovery activity throughout Calaveras County for Butte Fire 2015, tree mortality 2015, and winter storms 2017.
Good morning, Board. Michelle Patterson, OES Director for Calaveras County. Joshua Pack and I are here today to do the update for disaster recovery efforts, and I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is Joshua Pack. I'm your Director of Public Works and Transportation. And I'm going to do the first part of this. I do want to highlight that there are a couple other board items coming up subsequent to this. We'll be discussing some of these projects in more detail. However, I will touch on each of these briefly. This slide, and again, we've been doing these for a number of months, so a lot of this information is building on what's happened. So what I'm going to highlight is some of the new stuff that's happened over the last month or two. So, and that's highlighted in the red here. So there's two different, the way the federal funding works for disaster recovery for roads is there's two different funding sources and two different disasters. So Butte Fire and the 2017 winter storms are the two disasters, and the two funding sources are through the Federal Highways Administration and through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The acronyms for those are FHWA and FEMA. So the first part that I'm going to talk about relatively briefly is the disaster stuff from FHWA, all the projects that work with that. And the reason we're doing that is we're trying to attack those projects as a single project. I believe there's 23 or so projects, and they're all relatively small sums of money. If we try to tackle those as individual projects, we would be spinning our wheels, spending a lot of unnecessary time, especially because the projects are all very similar. A lot of pavement repairs, some minor culvert repairs, things that are all under the guise of the same scope of project that one contractor can complete. So with the FHWA, and I'm going to go next to the roads on the FEMA side of things. Jesus Maria and Mountain Ranch are two. There's other roads in that. We're in the process. We met with Caltrans last month to get clarification on teaming these. Caltrans was very supportive of that. We have a couple of environmental document paperwork that needs to get done with 2 or 3 of the 23 or so. That paperwork is in. We're waiting on a relatively quick response from Caltrans. Again, we're planning in the next month or two to solicit design services for this. The design is going to be pretty straightforward. When you repair a road or fix a culvert, it doesn't require a significant amount of engineering detail. So those documents will get put together pretty quickly. Our hope is to get this package together, get it approved through FHWA, and get a project out to construction sometime this summer. The next group of projects I want to talk about are a couple of the winter storm projects. These are through FEMA. There's 5 projects in total that we're working on. A few of these you've seen pretty recently because they've come to you for approval. Canyon View and Harbor Road are 2 of those. Both of those were approved for contracts to begin design and environmental and right-of-way work in January 2019. We've already begun and done quite a bit of work on these projects. On Canyon View, we've done some of our initial site assessments. As a matter of fact, we had moved up the schedule to do some of the geotechnical investigation at Canyon View, and then Mother Nature decided to come along and dump 2 feet of snow on the project site. So we're going to be waiting a little bit until the snow clears to get a better shot at that. But we're moving aggressively on that one. On Harbor Road, project's already been designed. We've actually done some initial hydraulic studies on this with some alternatives. We're hoping to have those done here in the next month or so, have a clear alternative in place for that project. So as you can see, shortly after your award in January, we started very quickly and aggressively at tackling these projects. Gwynn Mine falls under the same boat. We have a couple of alternatives. We think that's a relatively straightforward project. And again, we're moving aggressively to deliver all these this summer. Now, Blagan and Murphy's, again, I have additional items and subsequent discussions with you here coming up about these. I will touch on these regarding the approval side. We do have, and you will be considering contracts for each of these for both Blagan and Murphy's subsequent to that. So assuming that the board does approve those contracts, we actually have meetings already scheduled for tomorrow and Thursday. So as I said, we like to move aggressively. We are doing so. Part of the initial efforts with that will be determining alternatives. to move forward and reaching out with the public, with public meetings on those alternatives to get feedback before selecting a preferred alternative. Murphy's falls under that same boat. We have a contract with you subsequent we'll be talking about here in a few minutes. And again, assuming approval from that, we'll be aggressively starting later this week. So in summary, we have my goal, and I presented this to you in January. Our goal was to have all design contracts in place for all the FEMA locations by February 2019. Assuming the board takes action on that today, we will meet that goal. Matt Boyer, the previous interim director of Public Works, is acting on the project manager with this. He's doing an excellent job of making sure this project stays on task. One of the things we've talked about as a theme for these projects is to scope alternatives that can be delivered quickly and with minimal risk to the public and to the county. When I say context-sensitive project design, I mean the projects need to meet the environment in which they're being constructed. We don't need to build a $3 million bridge on a small road. So those are the sort of things we're looking at, making sure we're building it appropriately. There do remain hurdles. There are a number of regulatory agencies that we must navigate those waters. With that said, the approaches we're selecting and pursuing are designed to give us the greatest likelihood of delivering all these projects in 2019. So again, as I mentioned, I will have additional information on both Blagan and Murphy subsequent to this. With that said, I'll move it on to Michelle to provide feedback on the disaster recovery with tree mortality.
So I just want to thank the board for having the two items that were pulled off consent included in this discussion. I think they fit well here. So when I'm done giving the update for this PW 78 tree removal, I'm happy to address the questions that are related to that particular item that was on consent. Where we are with PW 78, we did have the amendment for the Phillips and Jordan contract on consent today, which was pulled off consent, so we can discuss that. So where we headed with this was, as soon as we had this one in place, we already have the Tetra Tech contract in place for the monitoring of the work that needs to occur for the biological and cultural and archaeological monitoring. That was approved by this board in June of 2018. Right now, we're waiting for these trees to complete the EHP, or Environmental Historical Preservation process. I was in receipt of the archaeological treatment plan for this phase several weeks ago, to which I provided feedback to FEMA. And so it is now going through the process of going through the State Historic Preservation Office and some other of the federal agency hurdles as it pertains to the cultural piece of this. I had hoped that we would have this project underway in January. Unfortunately, apparently the archaeological process moves a lot slower than we'd all like. So with that, I would like to turn it to the board for the discussion of P and J.
We're going to take that item up
After? Okay. Sure. Same with Tetra Tech. Okay. So for this PW 99 is the debris and ash removal, the insurance recovery project. You have an amendment to the Tetra Tech agreement for insurance recovery on the consent calendar today. It was pulled off. Basically, what we needed to do is to extend the term of this contract so that we can close out all of those activities up to and including ensuring that the remaining 1,500-ish trees don't require any additional duplication of benefits work on them. So with that, we're just, as soon as we can get that contract, the amendment approved, we can move forward and close out those activities and get the information from Tetra Tech. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tad Mason from TSS Consultants to give us the overview of our tree mortality project.
Good morning, Ted Mason Forester. This is just a brief update on the tree mortality program. In 2018, we completed 6 projects, which came to a total of 1,064 trees. We're about to go through a series of project explanations here of the projects that are in play. Just to reiterate, the 2018 projects were really focused on the Highway 4 corridor, where we had public safety concerns due to concentration of residents and dead trees along county roads. So we're now expanding out into more rural parts of the county, and I'll be going through the list here on those projects. So first up is 4A, that's Big Trees Village, north of Boards Crossing, Sky High Ranch. We've got a little over 760 trees that are targeted for removal. About 80% of this project has been completed. Right now, we're snowed in up there, so we will not be completing this until spring. 4B, it's a small project up at Sherman Acres, all the way to the county line. This is also under snow. It's about 40 trees, and we hope to implement this later on this spring. Project 5 is Lakemont, Meadowmont, and White Pines. This was 340 trees. We're 90% complete. We've had some delays due to weather, but hope to have this done by the end of February. Project 6, West Point. This is a larger project, 642 trees. It is under contract right now, and weather permitting, hope to have this going in early March. Project 7, another large project, 1,071 trees. This is being implemented starting today. We have a pre-operations meeting in Arnold. This is in the Avery Murphys area, and weather permitting, we hope to get with the program there. Project 8, Wilseyville, Glencoe, Railroad Flat, another large project, 854 trees. The contract has been awarded. Will likely start up in mid-March. Project 9, BLM. Not to belabor this, but BLM has been less than cooperative, and this has been challenging. We had maps and tree lists to them in October, and not much movement. So, barring another shutdown, possibly this Friday, we're hoping to continue to pursue this, but challenging agency. I'm not going to dwell on that. Project 10, let's talk about a cooperative agency. Forest Service has been excellent to work with. This is reflective of the Stanislaus National Forest, Calaveras Ranger District. Project 10 is underway. A little over, actually right at 400 trees, and we are 80% complete. Currently snowed in, however, but once weather cooperates, we'll get back with it. 11 and 12, these were just awarded. This is also Forest Service project up Summit View, and looking at 330 trees, as you can see. Hope to start on this, weather permitting, here by mid-month. On to 13 through 15, this is the last of the Forest Service projects for this current go-round. We have the ITB into contracting, and hopefully contracting will have this out here soon. This is a larger set of projects, 668 trees. Project 16 is Avery Sheep Ranch, 166 trees. We have a pre-operations meeting today to get this project started, and hope to have it completed by late March. Other projects that we're working on as far as getting the right of entry forms back from property owners are 17 through 21. These are all outside of the Butte Fire, of course. Some are west of Highway 49, and we're hoping with ROE return rates to implement those sometime in March. Last project, this is a cleanup project for the balance of the county on BLM ground. We've already got the trees marked and the project maps laid out. Depending on how Project 9 goes with BLM, we'll follow up hopefully with this project, Project 22. We're still seeing tree failures across the county. This is an example of trees failing off of BLM ground onto Skull Ranch Road. while I know the weather that we're having would sense that the drought is over and life is good and the forest is happy, that really isn't the case. We're still seeing tree mortality, and per our work with the director, we're going to continue and do a second survey of the county. In fact, we've already started on that with Project 23 to go back through and clean up the rest of the mortality as best we can. So that's the path forward. Summary, I mentioned we completed 6 projects last year, 1,062 trees. Additional projects are currently underway countywide. We continue to have some challenges with right of entry forms coming back in. We're concerned that some of these property owners feel that this is a code compliance opportunity for the county, which it is not. And we've done our best to articulate that. We continue working with the director to issue press releases on a monthly basis. So we're interacting with the media to get the word out, hey, this is free tree removal of hazards on your property that could impact county infrastructure, county roads. So we're trying to get that message out as best we can. In the course of the projects that we're implementing, we've had no safety issues with the tree crews, very important, or with the public. We've had a few incidental property damage issues, a fence being damaged, or a breather valve on a septic system, things like that, all that have been repaired. So it's, I would say it's going pretty well. Today, we have 10 projects active, treating 3,000 trees targeted. So I just want to let you know the bids have been awarded. We're just waiting for the weather to be a little more cooperative. Our foresters are ready, and we hope to be active again here soon, weather permitting. So with that, I will take questions.
I have, thank you, Supervisor. Shucks. On Project 4B Sherman Acres, will this include removing of logs and slash?
Absolutely. That's our protocol.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Unless, of course, the property owner wants the logs. I mean, sometimes they use them for firewood.
Yeah, you're not going to get in there because they hike or snowmobile into Sherman Acres.
That's right.
And we don't snow plow above Miko, do we? No. Didn't know if there were any changes. Project 7, Avery Murphy's, the 1,000 plus. Where is this on Avery Murphy's? Is this Avery Sheep Ranch, Murphy Sheep Ranch? Where are these?
You know, I don't have a map in front of me here for this project, but
if you get that, could you just email it to me? Thank you.
Yep, we can do that.
Again, this is logs and slash removed.
That is the protocol, okay. Yes.
The one on Project 10, 11, 12, I like the fact that you talked about the cooperation with the Calaveras Ranger District. I'm very supportive of our Ranger District. But could you just go into a little bit, what does that look like? Is this Forest Service land that abuts county roads?
That is exactly the case, Roger.
And I guess I'm missing something coming in late on this process. How is that, who's paying for that? Is that FEMA paying for that? Is that?
No, this is all state funds through the Community Disaster Fund, CDAA, as administered by State of California, OES.
Okay.
And so the county is reimbursed 75% from that fund, and then the balance 25% is from CAL FIRE. So 100% reimbursement through the state comes back to the county to cover these costs.
So it's really no different than BLM. The Forest Service is not paying to have these trees down the, or they're all taxpayers, so it's, which pocket are you getting it from?
Good point.
So, okay, it just wasn't clear. So this says it's going to be worked on Sheep Ranch and Avery area, number 10. Is that's Avery Sheep Ranch Road?
And
I'm
Valley View
assuming?
Drive.
And Valley View? Okay. And 11, 12, if you know where those are, if you could just send me so I have...
Absolutely.
Just
We'll send the
an
maps.
understanding of where they are. It's always nice to give people good news. And 16 says Avery Sheep Ranch, so I'm assuming that's another Avery Sheep Ranch Road?
Yes.
And that goes into District 2, so
Maps.
just, you can do my side of Avery Sheep Ranch first, please? I didn't see you go on this item.
Does that require a vote by the supervisor? No, okay.
Yeah, we support.
Just saying.
Easier.
Okay.
She has a sign that says Maria's district ends here.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Very good.
Okay, let's see, get back to where we were. So just a couple other updates as they pertain to
I just have one question, and it was for Josh. On items 9 and 22, we're talking BLM trees. Are any of these trees part of the funding we just agreed to earlier?
No, they're not.
They're not. That's why I didn't think they were, but I thought I would ask the
Those are
question.
different subset.
Okay.
Yeah. Other.
Supervisor Mills? My question, or maybe more of a comment, there's 4,800 trees identified here, plus more to come. Correct?
Correct.
Attending Foothill Fire Safe Council and talking with many of the other fire people, I know there's a couple of them in the back of the room. I think it's important that we start thinking about mapping these in a GIS layer. And incident commanders would very much appreciate knowing where these fuel reduction projects are going, and also where the fuel breaks are occurring, and get them all on one map where you can just pull them and you can look at it and you can see what your train looks like. Would be very, very valuable. So I don't know where the funding would come from to do that, but to have all of this information readily available on an incident would be beyond measure valuable.
So I have actually been working with CAL FIRE and with the support of Stan Moore. He's offered up his GIS team to undertake this project. CAL FIRE actually has a substantial amount of the data needed to create such a map, a tool. And so we're working collaboratively. We actually just met last week, and the project is much farther along than any of us actually thought that it was. So we're working towards that, absolutely.
And I have another reason for saying that is because in the past, we have had fuel break projects that when the individuals involved in the project went away, they took their brain with them. And so all of the information kind of fell away as well. And I just want to be sure that the level of activity that we're doing in this county is well documented, well understood by everybody, so if we need to maintain something in the future, we know when did we do this, what level did we work on, and when are we going to have to come back and review it again. This is an ongoing process now. This is not just, we bought a new car, great, we're going to drive it until the wheels fall off. This is, we got to be maintaining these projects as we think into the future, and hopefully the state will provide the adequate funding that we're going to need to ensure that the maintenance is part of this discussion, and it's not just a one-time, one shot.
Okay. So we are working towards that, and hopefully it'll get done pretty quickly here before we get fire season going. So just a couple other of updates as they pertain to disaster recovery. On January 1st, 2019, the California Emergency Services Act was amended, and it went into effect on January 1st to extend the number of days that each disaster declaration needs to be continued by. So previously, it was every 30 days that the governing body had to re-adopt the continuing resolution. They've extended that to every 60 days, so this is more of an FYI and perhaps agenda management thing on that one. And then in talking with Josh, and particularly because Public Works has taken such an aggressive approach for the roads projects, and as he mentioned earlier, there are additional presentations that he will be making today regarding these projects. We're recommending that we reduce the frequency of these updates from monthly to quarterly. This is the 12th one that I've participated in, and so I think, as each of these projects requires contracts to come to the board for discussion anyways, so we're just making that recommendation at this point.
Yeah, and I would highlight to that there is a website on OES's page that has updates to these information, and that recommendation does not affect that. So as projects get updated, as new milestones, we still do our normal efforts with public outreach, whether it's flyers for the local residents, whether it's public meeting outreaches, whether it's information on the website as new thresholds are established. So that information will still be there, but we'll look from direction to you if the quarterly is appropriate at this time, or if you continue to like the monthly updates.
Are you saying the updates will be on the OES website or Public Works?
So currently they're on the OES page just because that's where it was housed historically, plus because there's a blend of both. So the idea was to have one site that had all of it. It's currently on the OES site. I believe we have a link on the Public Works page. If we don't, I'll ensure that link's put on there to that. So all residents are pointed to one page with all the pertinent information.
Thank you. I would recommend that we keep it the way it is and we focus on checking the boxes and closing out these disasters. Then pretty soon we won't have to have these updates at all, right? Everything will just be peachy. But I do like to keep up on this.
Well, I disagree.
Okay.
I feel like there's a lot of time and effort that goes into doing this on staff's time, and if the updates are on the website, then it's going to behoove us to do it, to look it up, and I would rather staff be doing things to accomplish projects versus just giving us the updates. And I think we've pretty much gone along. I mean, I really appreciated this, and you've got me started, and I don't think I need to hear from you. If I want to know, I'll go to the website. That's why I asked. I just think we overuse staff.
Right, I will just have to disagree, and we can pull the board on this. I just think after 2 years of watching this process, I think it's something we need to stay close to. And we're talking about very big contracts. So, anybody else have an opinion?
I just want to get clarification. The contracts will still come to the board. This is not, that's still going to happen. But this is what I hear them asking, that they come to us quarterly. We'll have a chance to look at it as contracts come, which is why I felt that it was appropriate to move to a quarterly basis.
We'll just disagree.
I will agree with Marita.
Supervisor Mills?
I will agree with Marita.
Supervisor Stopper?
I agree with Marita.
All right, perhaps it's just because my district burned down, I pay greater attention to this and some of the holes that have happened historically in the process, but we'll move to quarterly updates.
Well, Chair, should there be a need to go back to monthly updates, I'm certain that the staff will be aware of the need to do that, and they will reach out to us and be professional and telling us that there's a problem. But as long as there's no issues and everything is flowing along at their normal rates, there shouldn't be a reason to be expending your time sitting in that chair right there.
Or that one.
Right there, rather than being doing what you are supposed to be doing.
The will of the board is clear. I will trust but verify, because when I haven't verified, things haven't worked out historically. not to the two people in front of us. But if that's in your presentation, we'll move on to the next item.
Okay.
We don't need, do we need public comment on that? It was just a,
Are we,
it's an item. Is there any public comment regarding disaster update, OES update?
Mike Falvey, District 2. Full disclosure, it doesn't take a lot to confuse me at times. With that in mind, the Butte Fire Services Report, PW 99, debris and ash removal, it's primarily insurance recovery. I'm going to round numbers off. Sure. Total project cost $416,000. The county is paying $30,000. An amendment number 30 on the agenda item is quoting, "This amendment only extends the term." But yet, on item number 30, today's agenda, I'll read this, and I'll leave some of the...
I'm sorry, can you just give me a second? Could you catch me up? Where are you at on this? Are you referring to...
I'm on this report.
PW 99.
PW 99.
Supervisor Callaway squared me away. Keep going on.
Okay. I hope that doesn't take away from my time.
We stopped it.
Rounding off some numbers, $416,000 total project cost, county $30,000. Over to the right, a note, this amendment only extends the term. Item number 30 on today's agenda, and I'm going to eliminate a few of the words, but I will quote exactly. To execute the First Amendment to Professional Services Agreement between Calaveras County and Tetra Tech for an amount not to exceed $855,000 for the period of 8/2/2018 through June 30, 2019. I don't see these numbers balancing out here. The total project cost is $415,000, but here they're asking, this says for an amount not to exceed $855,000 for basically 11 months. So what's it going to be? $855,000, $416,000? How much more is our $30,000 going to increase? And what the caveat with that is Tetra Tech. I realize these are federal funds. Not much is coming out of our pocket. But Tetra Tech has been called on the carpet recently in their involvement with emergency cleanups, milking the system, and to me, this is just another one of their moves. If they're getting $855,000 for recovering insurance, primarily insurance recovery, it says it right there, at what point does the money we're giving to them exceed the money that they're recovering for the county? I know I personally wrote them a check 2 years ago. Tetra Tech's playing a game here, folks, and we're all victims. So I'd look into this. These numbers just do not jive.
if it's appropriate, I can respond.
We'll go through our public comment, and then we'll have rebuttal. Any other further public comment? Very well, bring it back, staff.
Okay, so part of the issue is when you have FEMA project worksheets and there are amendments that need to be made to those project worksheets, they go through a reversion process. We are currently working with Cal OES to confirm that we have received a reversion request, which then increases the dollar amount of this project. So the total that you're seeing on this slide right here is what the original project worksheet was approved for. We're waiting for the amended version of that to come through, and I've been working with Rebecca Callan in the auditor's office and Cal OES since November to work through that process. So that's where I think a little bit of the confusion lies. As it pertains to the cost, they have not exceeded, there's still significant dollar amounts left in their contract. This is just to close out those activities. Further, I lost what I was going to say. Maybe it'll come back to me in a minute, but
not till next quarter, though.
Not till next quarter. There you go. we have recovered over $7 million in duplication of benefits. So I don't really know what the math is on that one. We're required legally to recover the duplication of benefits, and that is what we have done.
We could circle back on that when we get to item 30.
Sure.
Because I have questions. Mike, do you want to wait till 30 when we talk up Tetra Tech? Very well. There is no action on this item. We'll move on to the next agenda item.
Item 27 is from the Office of Emergency Services to authorize the board chair to execute Amendment 2 to Professional Services Agreement between Calaveras County and Phillips and Jordan Incorporated for hazardous tree removal services due to the Butte Fire incident for an amount not to exceed $10,856,225.39, an increase of $1,081,172 from Amendment 1, and extending the term until June 30th, 2019.
Dennis, you and I both pulled this. Would you like to go first?
Well, my concern is with the financing piece of it, and that you're showing where the funds are appropriated from. We've had cash flow issues in the past, and I want to ensure that there is sufficient funding within that org key to cover the potential cash flows that might be required here in the near future. If not, then we're going to have to come back before the board to change that appropriation limit. And that's something that has not been done regularly on this particular item, and I would like to see it start happening. So my concern again is that is there sufficient funds appropriated in that org key to handle your cash flow?
I don't have the budget in front of me right now, but I can certainly return to you at a later time after I've looked up that information.
Even if you throw me an email.
Sure.
Just so I understand the cash flow issue, because that has been, like I said, one of those things we've had some long discussions on in the past.
Right.
Thank you.
And I would agree with Supervisor Mills on this item, with his point.
To continue my conversation along these lines is that where money is being appropriated from, this board needs to be aware that appropriation is occurring. It isn't something that we find out about after the fact. And if we want to be transparent, we've got to be sure that the public and the board is aware. When we're in shortfall, come back to us, talk to us, tell us what you need to do to correct it. But we cannot be borrowing from accounts without having a conversation at the board level.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions also. I understand why we need to proceed with this, and I'm well on the record about my opinion about some of these two companies in particular, so I won't go over all that again. But what is the total county match on this? Is it 6.25?
The total county match it would generally be 6.25%. I have a vague recollection of being told that on the debris cleanup, on the debris removal piece, we were essentially told that we wouldn't have a match. So I do need to go back into my files to look to see if I have that written somewhere. So if in fact that is for sure that we don't have a match on this, then it would be zero. But I need to check on that.
Thank you. This is because of Department of Labor ruling, debris removal is not subject to prevailing wage. Therefore, we can't check payrolls and all that stuff to make sure that they're doing everything correctly on this project. What oversight do we have of Phelps and Jordan?
So when this project was first initiated, I wasn't here yet, and so I don't know what the...
Or us.
I know. So I don't know what the oversight at that point was, other than I believe there were multiple departments from the county involved, including Public Works and Environmental Health, and at one point I believe there was an external contractor overseeing this contract. So to the extent of what happened in the past, I can't really answer to that, but what I can tell you is that going forward, we'll have a tighter rein on the oversight of this
Who's
contract.
responsible?
Who is responsible? Me.
Okay, thank you. Where are we doing there's been information that I've been learning that, and this goes back to the fact that we can't check their payroll because it's not a prevailing wage job, which I wouldn't agree with, but it is, Department of Labor makes that call. So we can't check on this, but my understanding is that P&J has not settled up their bills for the last tranche. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that because I wasn't here then, but I can certainly do some due diligence and look into it.
Because I'd hate to be hiring them back on if they're going to stiff the local people. So you could find that out for us?
I can certainly try.
Where are they going to put their log deck? Are they going to stack these 1,000 logs?
You know, it's in the treatment plan that I neglected to bring with me, but I can certainly follow up with you on the location. Both those, the locations have been identified as well as where they will be taking their, the slash and other debris.
Okay. And what efforts is Phillips and Jordan going to make in this time to conduct local hires? What outreach are they going to do? Or our hotels going to be filled up with gentlemen from Tennessee and Florida?
You know, I haven't spoken to them because we don't have a notice to proceed yet on these projects, but when we do have that notice to proceed, it'll be part of the initial meeting.
So we don't have a notice to proceed from FEMA?
Right, because the trees that are remaining are still in the environmental process. So we have everything we need to do the cutting. We're just waiting for the environmental clearance.
So does this delay the process of getting a tree starting this process if we don't have a notice to proceed? Can we delay the answer on this until you can answer these questions I just put forward? Or does that delay the project?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily delay the project, but if I were to get communication that we're clear as far as our environmental and cultural and archaeological issues are concerned on this project, then we could start going through the kickoff of the project.
So when do we expect to hear the notice to proceed?
I was hoping to get it last month and I haven't yet. So it, is however long it takes for the National Historic Preservation Office and the State Historic Preservation Office, as long as it takes for all of this to go through all of those agencies, that's kind of how long it takes. So I'm hoping by the spring.
I mean, I'm happy to approve this, but I want to make sure these questions are answered.
Yep, I'm happy to follow back up with you when I've got better answers to the questions that are sort of forward-leaning, and then the ones looking backwards, I can
I don't
follow.
have to wait till next quarter?
You don't have to wait till next quarter.
No, I'm just not going to let up on this.
I can see that.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Public comment?
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. Good presentation. One of the things that the taxpayers and the public is concerned with is not having fires like this. And it would be good for a detailed forensic scientific examination of the fire to answer the questions: what could have been done to prevent or to reduce the damage done by this fire? Some of our fire experts say that the first attack on the fire, early suppression, is critical. And if there's not sufficient early suppression, the consequences are tremendous, which they were. And so I think the public would like to see a report done in a balanced way from a reputable source to come up with recommendations that would prevent a fire like this from happening again. Thank you.
Mike? How many public speakers do we have on this item? You can raise your hand. Okay, you will be our last speakers. Mike?
Mr. Segala, another fire is going to happen like the Butte fire. Going to happen.
Mike, you got to address the board.
Okay, I'm just...
I know, you know the rules.
First of all, I agree with Supervisor Garamendi. You go quarterly, you're giving them more rope. Okay, P&J, Phillips and Jordan, is a disaster cleanup company, which is a burgeoning industry. Tetra Tech is part of that burgeoning industry. What do burgeoning industries do? They take advantage of the situations. Speaking from a personal point, I was a victim of the Butte fire. Phillips and Jordan cleaned up my place. The disaster, the cleanup removal of burned materials was it was milked, okay? Cutting of the trees along the public right-of-way, I can guarantee you, if you had a local company, that they would have gone in and cleaned up my property in one 8-hour shift, the trees along the right-of-way. Phillips and Jordan took 4 days with about 3 times as many individuals as they needed. Now, you're going to keep extending these people. They're going to come back and ask for it again. Tetra Tech, Phillips and Jordan. It's about time you look at, we're paying for this, the taxpayers, everybody in this room. You're supposed to be watching after us, sitting up there. Don't let these people keep coming back and asking for more money. They don't need it. They're not using the money they get the right way. They're an industry. Their industry is providing income for their stockholders, for their overhead, et cetera, et cetera. When they sign a contract, hold it to them. If they want to extend the time frame, no problem. If you want to extend the dollars and cents, sorry, you signed a contract. They're using the system, and right now we're part of the system, and it's going to happen again in someone else's district, and then you'll be questioning their motives, and you'll be calling for monthly questioning, not quarterly. Thank you.
Ms. Cora?
Fire is part of my history from the time I was a small girl. My dad did a lot of cat work, piling brush, got the fire guys to come over and watch them burn it. And it was to help prevent fires. When the Butte fire started, I saw the pyroclastic cloud. And I was watching, and I saw 2 fires come up that were not natural. It was not from a spark, it was not from an ember, or whatever else. It was away from the pyroclastic cloud, and I was down in near Comanche, and I looked up the canyon, and I saw those 2 fires start after the pyroclastic cloud. And they were not natural. And if you have a fire, you can hit it as hard and as fast as you can. And you have somebody out there causing more fires, then you cannot possibly expect anyone to put it out. And that's what's going on in California. And it is beyond comprehension.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. I would like to, I'm not going to make a motion on this, but frankly, I have a lot of questions. I want to know the cash flow questions that you guys put out, as well as I did. Doesn't sound like we'll have a big delay if maybe we push this back to the 26th, and then we could put it on the consensus. We don't have to have a big discussion, but it gives us a chance to all feel comfortable. I don't know what the board thinks about that.
And that is my issue, is that we've had a number of modifications to this contract, and this cash flow thing has spiraled even sideways at times. So I would like to see that complete accounting as part of bringing this agenda item back, so that we can see, here was the original contract, here are the original costs, here are some of the amendments to that contract, some of those changes, and how is the money flow fit within those contract obligations? Because we're going to have to pick up, or we're picking up the shortfall, even if we're borrowing money from ourselves, we're picking up the shortfall until the state or somebody else reimburses us. And money right now, the interest rates, you're talking literally tens of thousands of dollars, given the wrong opportunity here, of money that we're just literally bleeding out because of the shortfall that we're having to pay internally. And I would like to know what those numbers are.
Yeah, I'll agree to bring it back on the 26th.
Does it work for everybody? Supervisor Stopper?
Works for me.
Yes, I'm sorry. Do we need a motion, or are we just going to postpone it till a date certain? All right, is there a motion to move it to
Yeah.
26th?
Yeah, I would make the motion that we move this to the 26th.
Motion made by Supervisor Toffenelli, is there a second? Second by Supervisor Mills. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0.
See you on the 26th.
See you on the 26th. And if we could get all these questions answered, I'm sure we could move it through on consent, not have to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 12:05. It is time for lunch.
We have one more item.
We have one more item that we'll take up after lunch.
After lunch, okay. Okey-doke.
So we will reconvene here at exactly 1:30 in the afternoon. Thank you very much. We stand adjourned or recessed.